Today, I'm trying every single 2D MMO I could possibly find in order to figure out which of them are actually worth playing, which ones are unique and intriguing and should be looked into, and also which ones are absolute garbage that you should never download to your PC because you're not only putting your own sanity at risk, but also your operating system. Now, when you think of an MMORPG, what do you see? Maybe a vast open world with places to explore, monsters to fight, quests to complete, and an overwhelming sense of adventure. This is often displayed through highly detailed, complex, realistic, or even stylistic design, or at least 3D graphics to further immerse the player within the world and make them never want to leave. But what if I told you that there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of MMOs that are actually designed in 2 or 2.5D? Won't these games miss out on all of that immersion? Well, in a sense, yes. But these games tend to excel in different ways, like systems, progression, gameplay, design, to make up for what it can't actually achieve with graphical fidelity and immersion. I've never personally been super intrigued by 2D MMOs, but I've also never really tried them. Until today. Now, just a few things before we jump into it. Here's a quick list of 11 games that I tried to play, but ultimately they wouldn't download. The servers were off, or I just couldn't create an account. Next, in order to document all of these in one single video, I'm not going to be going too in-depth with any of these games. Rather, just giving a quick playthrough with some quick first impressions. They say the majority of gamers decide within the first hour of gameplay if they're gonna continue playing. And I know that's definitely true for me. Some of these games may very well get better later on, or better after I've already finished playing. But that's why it's so important for games to really pull you in within the first few moments of gameplay. Games that really impress me within this video are definitely going to be ones that I revisit later on for a more in-depth review. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss these because during the course of this video, I came across some of the coolest MMOs in terms of gameplay and design that I've ever seen. With all that being said, I'm going to be giving every single one of these games a grading between A and F tier. A tier being the best of the best, and F being borderline unplayable. At the end of this video, we're going to crown one two-dimensional MMO the absolute winner, the king of all 2D MMOs. We're also going to talk about which was the absolute worst, the dumpster fire of the group. So let's get into it. Without further ado, and in a completely random order, here are 36 2D MMOs that I played over the course of the past week. Starting off with Bit Heroes Quest, a free-to-play 2D MMO available on PC and mobile that was actually released in 2016. Character creation is actually pretty funny, especially when the games are drawn in the 8-bit retro style, because there's really so little you can actually do to change how your character looks. I mean, you're entirely made up of about only 36 pixels, but I was still surprised at the amount of games that put a lot of effort into character creation despite this. And Bit Heroes was no different. I gave myself an awesome scar and loaded into the game. You're introduced to an NPC who shows you around the user interface and prompts you to enter this dungeon. Bit Heroes doesn't really feature an open world. Instead, you have the main player hub where you can interact with others, and then whenever you want to progress with a quest or the story, you enter a dungeon. Combat is Pokemon. No, literally, the sound, the appearance, the turn-based combat was instantly nostalgic for me, reminding me of the early Pokemon games or the really old Final Fantasies. After every battle, you're greeted with a reward screen detailing loot and experience gained. I fought 2 more ghosts and even got myself this new helmet before going against Tubbo. Anyway, I made quick work of the tutorial dungeon, and by completing the dungeon, I was rewarded with Batty, a new companion to aid me in battle. Back in the player hub, I claimed some daily rewards and also some rewards from achievements. There seemed to be quite a few other players in the player hub, which is always nice to see, and I tried talking to a few NPCs to figure out how to progress, but eventually entered the next dungeon where I was prompted to click the autopilot feature. So you can just let the game do dungeons for you. Personally, not a huge fan, this definitely docks a few points for me, and after finishing that dungeon, I noticed back in the player hub, I had this sort of energy drink currency in the top of my interface. Which, of course, once you run out of energy, there's nothing else meaningful to do in the game, meaning we have an artificially time-gated mechanic, and that was about enough for me. Now, I thought surely this would be a common theme throughout this video, but believe it or not, I think this is one of the very few time-gated mechanics in terms of an energy system that I actually ran into. Anyway, altogether, and because it's the first 2D MMO of today, I'll give Bit Heroes Quest a C, right in the middle. The game plays well, the UI looks good, the art style is charming and retro, but the autoplay feature and the energy time gating definitely knock it down a bit. Next, AdventureQuest Worlds. I remember playing AdventureQuest as a child. It was a pretty popular 2D browser-based MMO that you could find on Miniclip or AddictingGames.com. I don't think this is the same version I played almost 20 years ago, but let's try it out and see if it's somewhat similar. Now, you actually create your character, choose their class and appearance on the website before you download the client. I chose to be a mage, and moving forward with this video, mage was going to be the class that I choose for every one of these games, at least when the option is available. That way we can get the most direct comparison. I finally had my character all ready to go and jumped into the actual game. You're first shown a cutscene of a giant dragon destroying a castle with his fire breath as an army of evil skeletons try to push forward. It's up to you to fend them off, and this is the tutorial. You double-click the monsters to attack, which kind of surprised me because I believe in the original Adventure Quest, every time you entered into combat, it was a separate sort of turn-based system. This appears to be trying to mix a bit of action combat with the old turn-based system while keeping you in the main world. In order to move to the next area, you click these little golden arrows on the ground. They'll be grayed out if you can't access the next area. I fought another knight and an undead dog and continued on. I was given a quest to kill this guy. I did, and that ranked me up. So I was a mage rank 2, but somehow I was still just level 1. Overall, the tutorial is pretty simple. It explains your class, shops, enhancements, which act sort of like enchants that you can put on your gear and weapons, healing items, and eventually I made it to the end of the tutorial. I got myself to level 3 and continued towards the town of IdleOn, which, if I remember correctly, was the name of the website back in the day where you could actually play the original Adventure Quest. Overall, I feel like this is a great game if you have a literal potato and you can't play anything else. Otherwise, the graphics, the UI, the story, the gameplay, it all feels a little juvenile, and honestly, I can't really see myself playing this any more personal. I'll go with a D for AQ Worlds. Next up, we have Middle Ages Online, an 8-bit style MMO which you can download and play from their website. However, it seems like the most recent update was from December in 2023. So it's been a while, but let's check it out. And this is character creation. You love to see it. As someone who spent altogether way too long playing my Game Boy SP instead of paying attention in school, these graphics and sound effects are always so nostalgic to me. Now, Middle Ages Online is a game that is hyper-aware of exactly what it's trying to be. You start with a message saying the year is 1998 before being shown a typical 1990s room. And you're told that gamers across the world have discovered the era of online multiplayer. You're shown a family computer. I actually think this might literally be my picture. I had the same setup. And the message reads, a young kid, under the name of Waydot, logged out of one of their favorite games for the final time. One small existential crisis later, and you find a small floppy disk which contains a game that looks vaguely familiar, but you can't remember the name. And guess what? It's none other than Middle Ages Online. The game initiates a dial-up sounds and tells you to make sure no one else is using the phone line, otherwise the game would disconnect. This is fantastic. Before finally, after a few attempts, you load successfully into this house. And Steve here asks if you're God before realizing you're just another player. Honestly, this is one of the better intros I've ever seen to an MMO. I love games that don't take themselves too seriously and can joke while also striking a bit of emotion as well. It's a callback to a simpler time when games weren't chock full of microtransactions and you couldn't wait to hop online and chat with your friends. Anyway, in terms of the actual game, the UI is a little strange. There's a lot of empty black space, which you'll find is a bit of a theme with some 2D MMOs, especially the really old ones. You're taken through a tutorial which introduces you to all different kinds of crafting, from cooking to woodcutting to blacksmithing, etc. The quest list seems to be in a sort of RuneScape style where you're given all the names of quests that you haven't even started yet. When you go back inside to talk to Steve, there are 3 people who storm in looking for him, and apparently he's escaped. Also, the voice acting sounds like it's coming from directly behind you. It actually freaked me out. But this here is actually how you choose your class. By siding with one of these 3 adventurers, you'll be choosing your class, whether that's a warrior, a ranger, a rogue, or a mage. I chose to be a mage, of course, applied the magic missile ability, and I was told I needed to collect 60 logs to continue. I went outside and began chopping, but this seemed like a bit of a grind. Overall, in 8-bit MMO, I have no idea what this looks like later on, but it really has everything you could want. Progression, a robust skilling and crafting system, decent gear, a decent user interface, and a whole lot of charm and humor to go along with it. I'm going to give Middle Ages Online a B, because it definitely has potential, and it's the first game to really know exactly what it's trying to be. Moving on. Our first really old game of the bunch, Dransik. Actually released in 1998. It's kind of like the game on the floppy disk from Middle Ages Online, but let's see what a real 1998 2D MMO looks like. You're first given the option between a PvP or a PvE server. It says that PvP is very challenging and you can be killed literally anywhere over and over again. So in order to reduce the risk of immediately getting spawn camped, I chose PvE. And this is character creation. You choose a name, a race, and profession before applying some stat points. These are little previews for what your character's race will look like. The professions include blacksmith, cook, farmer, and warrior, which to the modern gamer like myself, that might sound slightly confusing as some of these sound like a class while others sound like a crafting profession. Anyway, there doesn't really seem to be a mage option, so I chose to be a warrior and then applied all of my stat points into intellect. And wow, that is a user interface. Yep, that's definitely a UI. Also, walking. You walk with WASD and your character just teleports from tile to tile. This is truly some OG MMO gameplay. I feel like I've entered a time machine. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is a little overwhelming. You have your backpack, your skills, your character sheet, in-game chat, the bestiary, and the quest log all open at once. It's kind of fun to look back at these really old games just to see how far we've come. It's like you can still find remnants of everything here in a modern MMO, especially things like the character sheet and the quest log, but the game being its own individual and resizable window is fantastically old school, and I'm kinda here for it. Anyway, my quest log suggested I should talk to Kristana here before she showed me the welcome book, which basically introduces you to all of the controls within the game. Afterwards, she had me click on this spawn gate before talking to her again. Then I was given a weapon orb where you can choose which weapon you want. Since I applied all of my points into intelligence, I chose for a magic weapon, the Ice Arcana. And afterwards, Kristana sent me on my way, telling me to talk to a child outside of the temple named Joe Harker. Okay, it turns out Joe Harker wants me to clear some snakes within the area. I figured, oh, just a couple of snakes, it shouldn't be too big of a deal. But on closer inspection, Joe Harker wants me to kill 30 snakes. What the hell does this kid want 30 dead snakes for? Okay, well, I began searching around for snakes to fight. I made my way into this forest, and while I didn't see any snakes, this bat immediately began attacking me. I tried everything in my power to figure out how to fight back, but unfortunately, I was stumped. And I definitely didn't want to die, so I just ran away. I consulted with my book that showed me the controls again and realized I had to press Q in order to toggle combat mode. Okay, that makes sense, so I went back into the forest, I toggled combat mode with the Q key, and found this time 2 bats. Unfortunately, no matter what I did, I still couldn't figure out how to actually attack. And yeah, that's when I realized this game is just way too outdated for me personally. I'm sure there's a ton of fun to be had in Dransik, especially if you get really deep into the story and the world, but for me, it's a little tedious. I'm gonna go with a D for Dransik. Next, Realm of the Mad God, probably one of the most recognizable 2D MMOs on this entire list. Apparently, this used to be a browser-based game that was released in 2011. I've had lots of people recommend that I try this game in my comment section, but I've never really had the chance to try it before now. I'm super excited to see what we're in for. So, character customization looks actually super clean for an 8-bit styled retro game. There are a few classes at the bottom which I can choose from, like Ranger, Priest, Mage, but the rest of the classes are actually locked, and can be unlocked through playing and reaching milestones within the game. Realm also offers a seasonal character, meaning you get a boost to experience and special rewards, but you can only trade with other seasonal characters. At the end of the season, they get transferred to a regular character. What makes Realm so unique is that, well, it's hardcore. If your character dies, they're dead forever. And that's actually how you unlock other classes to play, is by reaching certain level thresholds without dying. Inside the game, there's something known as the Vault, and here you can store items which will be shared across your characters, so it's not like every time you die, you're completely starting from scratch, but basically. This design is super intriguing to me. It's basically a roguelike 2D MMO with an 8-bit graphical style, but also with a twist of bullet hell shooter mechanics. I'm not kidding. Let's get into it. So the game plops you into the tutorial where you're shown how to move, WASD, and also click to attack. Then you're shown how to move and rotate the camera to see more of the area around you, and afterwards you're given an introduction to some dodge mechanics, as you have to avoid an obstacle course of projectiles shooting at you. Then, using my spells, I break through some doors and start shooting evil chickens. And I even take down the evil chicken god. As you can see, you get a little bit of XP every time you kill something. Then you're given a ring to fill out your equipment slots, and you're placed into the first real dungeon. Or at least the first real dungeon of the tutorial. After fighting these guys, I got myself to level 2, which increased my health and mana by 5 each. And also I got my first potions, which are obviously super important to staying alive in a permadeath game. I continued fighting my way through this dungeon. I got myself a new fire staff, which actually changed my base attack spell, and eventually made it to the big boss at the end of the dungeon. Bonegrind the Butcher. I finished him off pretty easily, got to level 3, and finished up with a tutorial where you're then teleported to the Nexus, which basically acts as a giant player hub. You can also teleport to the Nexus literally whenever and from wherever by pressing this button. Anyway, I explored a bit more around this area, I found the vault, a few seasonal event NPCs, and made my way into the open world where I fought some more enemies. I even got myself all the way to level 5, which actually unlocked a new class. All in all, the gameplay, interface design, look, and feel of Realm of the Mad God is absolutely fantastic for a 2D game. The whole idea of a roguelike MMO is really unique, and I absolutely can't wait to finish this video and play more. It's a seriously awesome game. That's going to be our first A of the entire list. Moving on. Swords and Crystals Online. 54 mostly positive reviews for a game that was just released 6 months ago. Surely, this has to be good. Okay, well, the login page isn't inspiring the most confidence, but hey, let's not judge a book by its cover. Character creation includes typing your name, showing your stats, and I think reputation with different factions before... Oh, okay, we're in. No customization whatsoever. Interesting. So the game directs you to move around with arrow keys. You can jump by pressing space, and if you press shift and an arrow key at the same time, your character sort of shoots forward. You can sneak by pressing control and interact with things or attack by pressing F. But why is the game so foggy? Surely this is going to clear up soon, right? I literally can't see anything. I continued through the tutorial, which was only going up by 2% at a time, and as I continued to learn about my HP and energy and the interface, the fog literally just never cleared up. This is like trying to play a game with those drunk goggles on, like you can sort of make out what might be in front of you, but you can't really tell for sure. Oh, there we go. It seemed to clear up slightly, especially near this light, but it's still kind of foggy. I don't get it. Is this supposed to be atmospheric? How does this have mostly positive reviews on Steam? Anyways, I continued on. I tried adjusting some settings. I learned about the scroll wheel, which is how you access basically every menu in the game, but everything about this game was janky. From the controls being locked to the arrow keys to needing to press shift or control while holding the arrow keys to do things. And on top of that, the scroll wheel function is awful. In order to close the scroll wheel, you actually have an option that exists on the scroll wheel which says close scroll wheel. All in all, I'm not wasting any more time here. Fresh off such a strong A, we now have our first F for Swords and Crystals. Better luck next time. Next up, Aberoth, a strange looking game from 2015. I really have no idea what to expect. So this is character creation. You choose your gender and the color of your shirt, skin, and hair. With no visual representation to go along with it, you're sort of just left guessing what your character might actually look like. You're asked to choose a realm where it shows how many other players are currently on each server. It looks like in total we have 38 people playing the game. Not bad. You're plopped into the game in some sort of underground jail cell, and I tried to open the door, but it's locked. Luckily, there's a key right beside this orc who is apparently sleeping, so you can just pick up the key and unlock the door. But the orc begins chasing you as you run along this path, and I love how your character runs. His legs just move so independently from the rest of his body. You end up falling out of the cave in the side of a mountain, which looks like a mountain my 3-year-old son drew at daycare. I kept running along this path and came across a bunny, which I attacked by pressing left click, and it dropped a gold coin. And eventually I made it towards this castle. Inside I met an NPC named Inala, and in order to actually converse with NPCs, you actually have to type and say hi or talk about something related to them. They must have some sort of AI which responds to your messages, and she asked if I would help her, so I typed back and said yes. She told me I need to find the NPC Lyrius, who lives to the south in a hut. Okay. So I explored around the castle a bit more, I saw some more NPCs, and tried to find a southern exit out of this place to go towards that hut. I basically explored every part of the castle and couldn't find any southern exit, so I just decided to go back the way I came in. But as far as I could tell, there was no way for me to go any further south. I decided to try and enter this cave to see if that leads to somewhere that might hint as to the direction I needed to go, but unfortunately this cave just led to more dead ends, similar to the castle. So how the hell am I supposed to go south when south doesn't seem to exist? Eventually I made my way back to Inala, and I started confronting her somewhat aggressively. I said, "What do I do? How do I go south?" She just asked if I wanted to help again, so I begrudgingly said yes, and she told me to go south to the hut. I said, I can't go south, there is no south. And she said, fine, we don't need the help of cowards, which really set me off, and I started hurling insults towards Inala. I kind of feel bad, but at the same time, this whole interaction has been super annoying. So I tried talking to some of the other NPCs. I even gossiped a bit about Inala to the store owner, Shalop, but he didn't seem too interested. Anyway, about 30 seconds later, I actually did find the southern exit to the castle. It turns out I'm just an idiot, and yeah, a little ways south, I found the hut. Aberoth, this has been an experience. A good experience? I'm not sure. Either way, I kinda had fun chatting with the NPCs. We'll go with a D. It could be worse, but it could be a lot better. Next up, we have RPG MO, which is MORPG, but reversed. Okay. The description doesn't read super well, saying that it reminds of Ultima and RuneScape Classic. Okay, we're already in. You move by clicking and your character's legs don't move, but he certainly does. I made my way over to the makeover guy, that's literally what he's called, and here's how you customize how you look. You can change your hair, pants, shirt, and facial hair. Not bad. When I was happy with my character's appearance, I made my way forward into the tutorial. First up was the combat instructor, who explained how to get experience in attack, strength, or defense by changing which style of attack you were using. Sounds familiar. And then he gave me a dagger and some leather armor. Nice. I made my way forward and I fought a rat, which is just click and wait. Apparently I need to kill 5 of these guys, so I did. And that got me to level 2 defense. Then I made my way forward and I learned about magic, where you can use spells to attack things from a distance. Similarly, I made my way towards the range tutor and learned about using a bow and arrow as well. Afterwards, you're basically taken to a new room to learn how to do each and every skill. This is very heavily RuneScape inspired. You first learn to fish and cook, then how to mine and create jewelry, as well as how to mine tin and copper to make bronze, and then how to smith that bronze. And then afterwards, you're shown how to dig sand, turn that sand into a vial, and then use that vial to make potions. It's all pretty standard MMO stuff. I learned woodcutting, I learned the functionality of a chest, which basically acts as a personal bank, and honestly, I think this is just 2D 8-bit RuneScape with a bit more of an old-school medieval theme. The more I think back to the description, this reminds of Ultima and RuneScape Classic. Honestly, spot on. You couldn't have described it any better. RPG, MO, you get a C. Honestly, not bad. I could see myself playing this. Okay, enough puns. Next. And this is one I've been putting off for far too long. Probably the most recognized 2D MMO title of all time, MapleStory. I'm gonna be completely honest here. One time, like 3 years ago, when I first started my YouTube channel, before I even made RuneScape videos, I was going to make a series called RuneScape Player Tries MapleStory. I tried to play MapleStory and I remember disliking the game so much that I didn't think I'd be able to finish the video. But these days, with a much more robust catalog of MMO experience behind me, maybe I can give it a more fair assessment. Immediately, I was having fun, switching between the Europe and North America section as it makes a cute little sound. This is already looking pretty good for MapleStory. And at this point, you're asked to choose between 7 different servers, but these servers are also in 3 subcategories, including Heroic, Interactive, and Seasonal. Apparently, Heroic has restricted trading, Interactive allows trading, and Seasonal has unique seasonal content. So, suffice to say, I was still somewhat confused by these options and ended up just choosing one of the interactive servers. And here you can actually see my character that I made almost 3 years ago. Looks like I got him to level 10, which makes me think that leveling is pretty quick in MapleStory, considering I don't even think I played that character for a full 10 minutes. Anyway, I decided to create a new character where you basically choose from a big list of heroes, which are essentially your class. I couldn't really tell what most of these heroes did, but you can see a bit of an infographic here which informs you how difficult they may or may not be to actually play. I was a little overwhelmed at the massive amount of options, but eventually found the Ilium hero, which apparently was the easiest class to play that I could find. Afterwards, you can change your hair and skin color, but that's basically it. And then you're asked to choose a keyboard setting. You can go with basic or secondary. The secondary looked more familiar to me, so that's what I went with. I was then asked if I wanted to make this my hyper-burning character. Basically a character that levels up faster. I'm assuming it's MapleStory's version of a catch-up mechanic. So I said sure. And I was met with a cutscene explaining the world and story. It was unskippable, and it actually took quite a while, but eventually I made it into the tutorial. Now, if you remember, I had that other character, but I'm assuming he started in a different tutorial, or perhaps they've changed it since I last played, because this looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. I had this sort of robot companion in front of me who would guide me through the tutorial as I learned to play MapleStory. Also, my character now has a different hairstyle than he did in character creation. And in fact, I couldn't even change his hairstyle at all in character creation, so that's a little strange, but we'll just roll with it. Anyway, MapleStory is basically a platformer MMO. It's a side scroller and you're constantly going to be doing jumping puzzles. It's a little awkward because while I'm using the arrow keys to move, the jump key is actually Alt, which is just far enough away for it to be annoying. At first, you're asked to solve this jumping puzzle and make it past all these guards without touching them. I actually failed a few times, but eventually got it down. Next, I was teleported into a bit of a scrapyard and given my first quest. The entire user interface is very indicative of early Eastern-made RPGs with a sort of Digimon, Pokemon, Dragon Ball online interface that every one of their games used to use. Here, I was finally introduced to combat where I fought some of these robotic hedgehogs by pressing the control key when I was in range. Fighting all of these actually took me all the way to level 4, so my suspicion that early leveling was fast was correct. Anyway, I continued through the rest of the tutorial, I applied some stat points, took a good look at the in-game shop, and yeah, MapleStory. I'm sorry for the long-term MapleStory fans out there, but this is just not my game, I guess. Side-scrolling makes it feel very closed in and less like an open world to explore. The overall feel of the game is like a relic from the mid-2000s, which I guess it is. And the in-game shop and monetization are obviously out of this world. It's not for me, that's okay. I'm not buying into the hype. That's going to be a D for me personally. Next up, HeartWood Online. This game was actually released in 2023, so it's fairly new. But it's still technically in early access, and judging by the store page, it looks pretty great and seems to have a ton of positive reviews. Let's check it out. So, character creation. It's pretty similar to everything we've seen so far today. You have 4 different class options, including Warrior, Rogue, Priest, and Mage. You land in a sort of forested field, and you're immediately given a quest to collect 3 rodent pelts. Controls are standard, WASD to move, click or space to attack and interact, and here's the map, which looks really cool. It basically just zooms you out far enough that you can't see your character. Here's my inventory, which also features all my equipment, and it looks like you can purchase some expansions for loadouts and inventory space, but that's all pretty standard. I only have one ability right now, which is actually a heal, so I made my way forward and started fighting some of these rabbits. The art style, while being 8-bit, is actually quite a lot more detailed than other games of a similar style, so it actually gives it a much more modern feel. The combat is super easy, obviously just click to attack, and within a few moments, I already had the 3 rodent pelts. I handed in the quest to the fur trapper and got myself a wand as a reward, as well as reached level 2. Here, I was able to spend some of my talent points. You have quite a wide array of options, from crit chance and damage to health regen and dodge chance, etc. After I took a look at my skills tab, and there are 9 different skills, from mining and smithing to tailoring and herbalism. We've seen a few games that have pretty full gathering and crafting systems, but something about 2D games is you expect a bit of simplicity while allowing for it to be complex later on. And that was the vibe I was getting from HeartWood so far. Anyway, I accepted the next quest to get 10 small game meat from the same rabbits, and this time using my wand, I could attack them from a distance, and it was way faster. I handed in that quest as well, which rewarded me with some boots, and also took me to level 3. Unfortunately, to do the next quest, it appeared I had to get to level 4. So I decided to look around a bit. Over here, there was a bank and an NPC with a shop, and I decided I might as well keep grinding for a bit and try to get to level 4. I found some bigger level 3 bunnies, which gave me a bit more XP, and even a level 5 deer, which actually took me quite a while to take down. And a little bit later, I finally did get to level 4, which actually took a decent amount of time, considering I had no quests to help along the way. I was able to equip those boots I got as a reward for my last quest and continue on. At some point, I stumbled across this coal, which I could actually mine, and I got 90 mining XP every time I got a piece of coal. You can also chop down any of the trees in the area. This game is basically doing every little thing right. It's already shaping up to be basically exactly what I'd be looking for from a 2D MMO. It has good combat, good crafting, and an awesome design both graphically and with the user interface. The little XP pop-ups for constant dopamine to let you know that you are indeed grinding. Honestly, fantastic game. I could see myself playing a lot more of HeartWood. That's going to be another A in my books. Moving on, SoulSaver. I'm gonna cut to the chase. This game looks like hot garbage, just judging from the preview here on the Steam store page. But just because a game looks like garbage on the store page, does that mean it's actually garbage? Let's see. So into character creation, you're asked to choose between good and evil, basically as two separate factions. I was looking for a mage class and I found one. The magic user. You just know that they translated this using Google Translate and they were like, yeah, that sounds about right. Also, what exactly is going on here? What kind of game am I about to play? Anyway, I named myself Waydot, and you can choose between using a staff or a wand as a starter weapon. I chose the wand and created my character and hit start game, and oh, I think it actually is that kind of game. Then the game turned to a black screen and stayed on the black screen for about 2 minutes while it said it was loading the field data. I genuinely thought that this might be it for SoulSavers, but I closed the game and reopened it, and voila. This time, it loaded almost immediately. To no pleasure of mine, I was shown a massive daily login reward screen and a giant jumbled mess of a user interface that basically explains nothing. It looks like we got ourselves another side-scroller, and in fact, this game was released in 2012, which is far after MapleStory's success. If I had to guess, this is a MapleStory clone. After a small jumping puzzle and some fights against these guys, I was teleported to the main game, which starts in this village. I chatted with the village elder who gave me a welcome gift. It's one of those items you can open for rewards every few levels, and for some reason it was placed in my third bag in my inventory. I don't know why it defaulted to that spot, but okay. Next, the village elder gave me a quest to find groundwater, but he literally didn't tell me where to actually find the groundwater. I just had to get it. Also, why is this thing following me? Anyway, I ran around looking for groundwater. I fought some flying fire guys named Kiburi, which took me to level 2, and in about 10 seconds, I was level 3. And about 30 seconds after that, I decided to quit this game and uninstall not only the Steam file, but also whatever extra malware it came with. F. That was a poor attempt at copying MapleStory, which is a game I already didn't like that much. Next. Here we have another very old game. In fact, I think this is the oldest game on the list so far. This game was released in 1997, meaning I'm only 1 year older than this game. Tibia. Now, the game says that there are 14,350 players online, which would actually place Tibia in the top 20 most played MMOs currently, which just didn't seem accurate for such an old game, but then I checked the Twitch directory and there were 9.3 thousand people currently watching Tibia. What? So, Tibia, the massively popular MMO, 27 years after its release. So, first off, the user interface is similar to Dransik we played earlier, but a little bit more refined. Instead of a ton of empty blank space, we have this gray texture, which helps keep things a little more structured. You have a character sheet, a player guide, a quest tracker. Really, it kind of looks the same. You can click to walk, and the walking is rather slow, but then I'm told to click and drag the sword into my equipment slot, which took more than a few tries, but eventually I figured it out. Afterwards, I was told to left-click on the cave raptor in order to attack it, and then I was shown how to use my ability on my action bar. I was only hitting the raptor for 1 to 2 damage, and he was hitting me back for like 20 to 30 damage, which seemed like this wasn't really a fair fight, especially considering I just spawned into the game. But eventually I took him down, which actually got me to level 2, and I was able to loot 3 coins from this raptor. After I talked to Monesto here, and you interact with NPC chat options by actually clicking certain links in the text box. I was given a piece of rope and told to use it in order to climb deeper into this cavern. While trying to go even further, I was then given the option to choose a class: Knight, Sorcerer, Druid, or Paladin. I clicked on the Sorcerer, but the game actually gives you no indication that you currently selected that option. However, after clicking Next, it seemed to work, and at this point, I was in the town of Dawnport. I talked to an NPC here who told me I can go fight things, and I really wasn't understanding exactly the point of this game. Do you just fight stuff, loot stuff, and sell stuff? I mean, really, if you break down any RPG, that's basically the gameplay loop, but having an objective or something to work towards is always a nice way to track your progress. But I made my way down these stairs and into the wilds and started fighting some mountain trolls. Now that I had chosen Sorcerer, I had 3 abilities, and one of them was a decent AoE. So I was taking these guys down pretty easily. I did find it rather distracting with all of these text pop-ups right in the center of the screen. It made it difficult to sometimes actually see what I was doing and clicking on. I do wonder if there's a way to somehow move these, potentially, but just defaulting to the center of the screen is definitely a bit annoying, especially with how frequently they pop up. At this point, I was level 5, and honestly, this game's just a little too old for me once again. The tediousness of these old games is surprising. You have to not only learn the game, but also how to interact with the game. Nothing is really self-explanatory. The user interface is confusing, how to pick up items is strange. It's definitely interesting, and it's awesome seeing such a blast from the past. But for me personally, would I play this in 2025? Well, if I wasn't making this video, probably not. Gonna be another D from me. Sorry, Tibia fans, who knows? Maybe I'll do a deep dive into this game in the future, play 100 hours to try and understand why this game is so massively popular. But for now, and just from a first impression, it's not for me. Moving on. 8-bit MMO. No, seriously, that's the title of this game. It's not like just a description of the game I'm about to play, though that would work as well. But no, 8-bit MMO is the title. Apparently it's a construction, sandbox, building-focused MMORPG, but obviously in 8-bit, which sounds interesting. So after choosing the main server, you're loaded into the game with the classic blue gradient text box, and you're told to wake up. This guy, Robbie's, which I'm assuming is the developer's name, immediately tells you to GTFO. He goes on to explain that you're smelly and you're not a hero, and he has a new hero in his house every day, and the only thing he thinks you're the hero of is not showering. He then sends you to go on a quest to his kitchen and talk to him there, which is actually really funny because it's a play on the meme of seeing the same character in two locations, as you can see both Robbies on your screen at the same time. Afterwards, he sends you on a quest to kill lobbyist slugs who are actively working against him, even in his own home. And you learn that spacebar does indeed equal sword. I made quick work of those slugs and went back to Robbie, who didn't expect you to actually survive. And now he tells you to use the teleporter, which is actually the phone booth from Doctor Strange, before continuing with the tutorial. Here, the game explains that this tile, being slightly darker gray, actually indicates a space in the wall, and that's how you get through. Thanks. I feel like I could have figured that out myself, and somehow I feel as though that's also the point. Anyway, apparently in 8-bit MMO, when you're on a road, your character moves faster. Like, a lot faster. At the end of the road, there's a pit which you're prompted to jump into, which actually gets your character stuck. But this is just to teach you about the unstuck mechanic, where you can spawn at root. This is root. Robbie then tells you to choose between these two NPCs. One will teach you about building, and the other will teach you about more combat. I decide to learn more about building, so I use the teleporter behind Draco here, and you're placed into your own building instance and given a few blocks to work with, though only 10. I was actually really surprised at how smooth the building felt, and I can imagine with enough resources and time and creativity, you could actually make yourself a pretty awesome base in this game. I was definitely not expecting the actual building mechanics to feel and play this well. It's basically 8-bit Minecraft. Anyways, afterwards I talked to the other NPC at root and teleported and killed lawyer cats. I even got myself all the way to level 2. This game honestly surprised me with its less than ideal graphics looking basically like a Flash game, but the mechanics and overall gameplay felt really smooth. And its hilarious ability to break the fourth wall but also make fun of itself while knowing exactly what the game is all about. It's kinda similar to Middle Ages Online that we played earlier. Because of that, 8-bit MMO also gets a B. Next, Kakele Online. The store page looks pretty good and it has mostly positive reviews, so let's check it out. Oh my god, what the heck is happening? My mouse is going insane. I tried playing Kakele for about 5 more minutes, both exiting the client and coming back, but unfortunately this problem just seemed to persist the entire time, so F, I guess? Alright, next up we have Orake Classic, a 2D tile-based MMO that was originally released in 2016 as an attempt to replicate an older retro style of RPG. Now, interestingly, before you actually start this game, you get this giant pop-up to customize your keybinds if you want to. I didn't feel the need to, but this seemed like a strange way to go about it. Anyway, you have 3 character slots, and this is customization. You can choose a gender and an outfit. Nice. I personally thought outfit 3 looked the best. And this is Orake. The screen is seemingly having a seizure, and honestly, there should probably be a seizure warning as well. It's a lot to take in. I don't understand the constant stuttering, and WASD is actually written directly into the floor in order to tell you how to move around. There's a key in the bottom corner of this room, which I picked up, and then I made my way down the stairs. You press Control to interact with things or attack. And I guess I made it into the main tutorial area, and this was a lot less straining on my eyes. I don't know why the starting area looked like how it did, but I'm glad that everything seems to be pretty much normal here. Next, you talk to the Duke, and he shows you around some of the interface, including a skills page and your character sheet, before sending you to kill some of these rats. And he equips you with a sword, a bow and arrow, as well as a staff for magic. I double-clicked the staff, which actually dropped it on the ground, but I had no idea. I thought I equipped it. So I punched this rat and then cast the spell Ignite, and it died. My staff is still just laying on the ground over there, though. Then I double-clicked my bow and also dropped it on the ground. I punched another rat to death, but then I kind of realized what was happening. So I picked up my bow with spacebar and then dropped it again and picked it up again, and then I finally equipped it by pressing E. There we go. Anyway, I killed a rat with each of the 3 weapons I was given, and that completed the quest. I made my way forward to the tutorial witch who taught me how to gather ingredients and make potions by clicking and dragging ingredients onto the potion station. Afterwards, I learned about fishing, and then cooking, and then woodcutting, and then I realized just how game-changing RuneScape's tutorial island really was. I didn't realize how many games had basically copied the exact same formula. This seems to be especially prevalent in the 2D MMO space. I mean, this is already the 2nd time in the video that I've mined copper and tin to make bronze and been told to smith a bronze dagger. Anyway, this game seems like it has potential. The graphics are a little grainy and some of the user interface is a little janky to understand. I feel like double-clicking an item should never drop it, but I'll go ahead and give Orake a C. It's nothing special, but it's not too bad and it has potential. Next up, Dofus. Now, full transparency here, I've been sponsored by Dofus in the past to promote this game. However, this video has no such sponsorship, so I'm just going to give my completely honest take. Now, Dofus is actually quite a popular MMO. It's France-based and very popular in France, though we've started to see it grow in other regions as well. There's quite a few different servers and even server types to choose from, however, I went with the recommended Braille 2. Into character creation, which is probably the most in-depth character creation we've seen today. There's a whole host of different classes and playstyles to choose from, including DPS, healing, support, tank, of course, but also a mix of all of those: healing support, damage support, tank support, DPS melee, etc. There are 19 classes to choose from here, so find one that you think fits your playstyle the best. Since I've been going for spellcasters and mages basically the whole video, I chose the Hupper Mage. Anyway, you can further customize your look and dial of your equipment, as well as choose what sort of stance you want your character to carry themselves with. After I was happy with my choices, I chose the name Waydot, and you're spawned into this sort of ethereal bridge, beside this owl-like character who guides you throughout the tutorial. The user interface looks phenomenally minuscule, which is quite nice considering the UIs I've seen today. It's click to walk, but if you want to walk into the next sort of area, you have to find this gray box, which will appear on the sides of the screen, indicating you can enter the next place. It's basically a side-scroller, except you can also go north and south. Next, you're introduced to combat, and as far as I know, Dofus and their other game Wakfu are the only 2 really successful MMOs to implement a turn-based strategy system. You basically have a certain amount of action points to use every turn, and you can use them to move your character or to use abilities. It's pretty fast-paced compared to a lot of turn-based systems, and combat feels a lot more involved and not nearly as slow compared to other games that use the same style. After that fight, I was given a full set of armor, which kinda sucks because my original armor looked way cooler. And also, the tutorial required me to double-click each piece to equip it and not drag it. So because of that, I had to unequip all of my armor and re-equip it to actually continue forward, which was a little strange, but we figured it out. And afterwards, I fought a cloud sheep with horns that had a cloud sheep baby in front of him. I made quick and easy work of those 2 weaklings, and honestly, I was really enjoying the combat and what I had seen of it so far. At this point, I got to level 2, and every time you level up, you acquire characteristics, which is basically your talent tree or skill point system that allows you to further customize your character how you want. Then you're introduced to gathering and crafting with a really awesome tutorial that has everything in one place and doesn't get overly complicated. It shows you mining, woodcutting, harvesting, fishing, and even crafting all in one simple little area. I wish more games would do their tutorials like this. To finish up with the complete tutorial, you have to do one final battle against 3 opponents, but this time you have a companion to fight alongside you. After easily dispatching the enemy, you're finally able to leave the tutorial and you're dropped into Incarnum, or the Way of Souls. And it was at this point that I realized the entire UI is completely customizable, so you can really personalize how the game looks for you. Overall, I think Dofus has the potential to be a much bigger game than it even currently is. The fans of the combat system absolutely love it, and they say they can't even play other turn-based games because Dofus just did it so right. I'm not a big turn-based guy myself, but I have to say, in Dofus, it doesn't feel quite like the turn-based combat you probably are used to from other games. Graphically, this game is beautiful, it runs smooth, everything seems awesome here. I'm gonna go ahead and give Dofus a B, but it might be the best B rating on this entire list. Next up, Pixelite, a 2D MMO that was literally released just a month ago. It might be the newest release of this entire video. It seems to be a fairly unknown game with only 18 mixed reviews, so let's see what it's all about. Character creation has no form of customization at all. You just choose one of the 7 starting classes and hit create. I went with Wizard, and I guess that's what I look like. You spawn into the world on an island between 2 bridges, and a character in the corner has what looks like a quest. And also there seems to be a server host online. I'm assuming this account has to be logged in to host the entire server. I accepted the quest from Tamsin here to kill 2 rats, and surprisingly, this game works with a tab target system instead of just click and aim like I was expecting. I only had 1 ability currently, but my wand's auto attack was pretty decent as well. I'm not sure why, but the actual 8-bit graphics of this game felt more reminiscent of the older Pokemon games than anything else I've played so far. It might be the character model or the grass or the small trees, but it really just felt like I was playing Pokemon Emerald. The UI is actually super clean, you have all the essentials where you would expect them to be, and after handing in the quest, I got my magic level to 2. But I was still level 1. My next quest objective was to leave the temple. So far I hadn't seen a temple, but I stepped on this teleporter, and the only option was Eldoria City, which is, I guess, where I already was. Also, somehow by stepping on that teleporter, I got myself to magic level 7. So far, the design, the graphics, and the feeling of the game is fantastic, but in terms of questing, story, and understanding what to do or why I was leveling up, I was a little confused. So I crossed the bridge, and that somehow got me to level 2. What? Anyway, I fought some chickens, some pigs, even a horse. I traveled a bit more and found what seemed to be a town with an inn, and this NPC Thorn had a quest for me to kill 8 pigs. While committing mass pig slaughter, I found my spellbook, and I actually had another ability I could learn, Mana Barrier, which basically acted as a shield. Anyway, I finished the quest, I got to magic level 10, and all in all, I think Pixelite has some real potential. It just feels a little empty at the moment and a little missing in terms of direction and narrative. But the gameplay looks and feels good. It seems to be attempting a 2D version of classic WoW. And I can respect that. I'll go with a C, but I could see it stepping up in the future with a bit of a better new player introduction. Next, Ashen Empires. This is actually the sequel to a game that we played earlier in this video, Dransik. If you remember, that's the game where I couldn't figure out how to fight a bat. I gave Dransik a D rating because it was a little old and outdated, and because of that, quite tedious. So let's see if Ashen Empires improves on some of that. This was released in 2003, so it's definitely still very much so an old game, but hopefully not quite as difficult to figure out as Dransik. Okay, the server select screen looking eerily similar with the PvP and PvE options. This time I decided to go PvP. Why not? On the off chance that someone is actually online, it might make for some interesting interaction. Anyway, you can choose from 3 separate races, Night Elf, Human, or Orc. Instead of choosing a class, you mostly just assign stats. I went pretty hard on intellect. Now, let's jump into this and see how it plays compared to Dransik. Okay, well first off, the user interface is most definitely a bit cleaner than its predecessor, though it still utilizes a lot of the same ideas and a lot of empty black space. The graphics have stepped up ever so slightly, but it's still roughly the same idea. This game doesn't necessarily look or feel like it came out in 2003, just 1 year before World of Warcraft was released. But maybe they were trying to stay true to the original. Anyway, in order to enter the castle, I had to follow some dialogue between these 2 characters standing out front. Lord Tremblay here asked me if I wanted armor to fit a crafter, a mage, or a warrior. So I guess this is a sort of class selection. I chose the robe and made my way inside. You're brought to a room with every kind of trainer you can imagine, from all weapon types to all kinds of professions. And after talking with the NPC inside, I actually got to level 2. He told me that weapon trainers were to my right, but if I wanted to train magic, I would have to find the magic trainers who are downstairs. No problem, right? Well, it was a bit of a problem as I went downstairs and searched in every possible corner of this little dungeon, finding all kinds of NPCs and even spiders, but no magic trainers. I went back upstairs and continued looking around before I realized that these are actually also stairs that lead to a different basement. Okay, so I eventually found the magic trainers. Essentially, there are 4 different types of magic in Ashen Empires. And this is almost like a further class selection, or a spec. You can choose between nature, body, mind, or soul magic. I chose nature magic and was given 200 nature runes, a wooden wand, and access to my first spell, Flame Strike. So I made my way back to the other staircases because I had seen some spiders there when I was looking for the trainers, and this would be the ultimate test for Ashen Empires. If I can figure out how to actually attack a mob, it will undoubtedly have to get a higher grading than Dransik. It was clumsy, it took a few seconds, but I eventually placed the Flame Strike spell on my action bar. And wow, it feels nice to finally attack and damage an enemy in this particular series. Ashen Empires, while definitely still very outdated, very old, it's quite a bit less tedious than it felt to play Dransik. So because of that, we're going to give Ashen Empires a C. Good job, team. Next up is Rogalia, an open-world sandbox MMO that claims to have a cozy atmosphere, released in 2018. This definitely seems unique. Character creation, once again, has no customization, but the classes sounded pretty interesting. They seem to be tailored, once again, more around professions than your standard class system. You have blacksmith, alchemist, tailor, hunter, farmer, etc. I chose to be a carpenter because when it comes to crafting in games, generally chopping trees is my go-to relaxing activity. I'm an OG RuneScape player, what can I say? Anyway, you're dropped into this world beside a man named Plato who has a quest. The user interface is clean and the minimap in the top right has a cool design. You have your standard nameplate featuring relevant information in the top right, and one of the bars is fullness, implying that you probably need to stay well fed to survive in Rogalia. Now, looking through some of the interfaces, it seems that this game puts a lot of importance into the skilling and crafting system, with already a massive amount of skills as well as items you can potentially make. Also, did they just steal these emotes directly from the iOS emojis? Is that not like a huge breach of copyright infringement? Yes. Yes, it is. Anyway, Plato here needed me to collect some stones and branches and bows from trees. It's click to move, click to pick up, and right click to bring up an option of the 7 different items you can actually gather from trees. I chose bows because that's what I needed. Now, I was told to refine the branches and bows into sticks and twigs, which I did. And then I was told to sharpen 2 of my stones, which I also did. And then I was able to craft a stone knife using those stones, twigs, and sticks. So, as you can see, the crafting system is pretty in-depth, even right from the get-go, which I'm sure for some people this is already looking pretty intriguing. Afterwards, I made a sharp stick, and the area within this building changed again, this time featuring fruit trees. And I have to admit, this is kind of a cool tutorial so far. My character was thirsty, so I had to gather some bark from these trees and fashion it into a cup, which I could then use to collect some of this water and drink from it. Afterwards, Plato told me to gather some apples, and this disclaimer mentioned that if I overate, I could use the toilet. What? What toilet? Oh, maybe that toilet. So I purposely gathered too many apples and ate until my fullness bar was above 100%, and am I about to shit in a video game? Yes, the second option on this toilet was to defecate, and while that did relieve some of my fullness, it also took half of my HP. Listen, if you go take a shit and lose half your health, you better see a doctor. Immediately. Anyway, I continued on with the tutorial, I fought some training dummies, and was teleported to the main game, where you're placed in a town. There seems to be some Christmas event going on, and after making my way into the open world, I basically realized I'm playing the 2D version of PAX Day. You can select an unclaimed plot of land and begin building your base of operations. Just judging by some of the other player-built bases I saw around, this game goes ridiculously in-depth regarding crafting and building. And if that's your type of thing, this might be right up your alley. Honestly, the fact that I shit in this game, I don't even care anymore. It's a B in my books. And genuinely, the game seems really fun and a lot more in-depth than I was originally expecting. Moving on. Law Tale. Released in 2006, and oh boy, is this MapleStory clone number 2. Looking like it. Really looking like MapleStory here. I'm gonna just fast forward through a bit of my time playing Law Tale and save you all the hassle. This is just MapleStory clone number 2. It can fit right beside the other MapleStory clone, SoulSaver, in the F tier. Next, Aesire Online, an MMO created in 2023, which was inspired by Argentum Online, which is actually another 2D MMO that was quite popular during its year of release in 1999. Unfortunately, there is no English translation of Argentum, but at least I can try Aesire here, which was inspired by Argentum. Now, I had an interesting bug happen while playing Aesire, where while I was recording this game, I couldn't see my cursor. At least not in-game. However, if I look towards OBS, my recording software, and I could see the preview of what I was recording, there I could see my cursor, just not on the actual game. So I literally played this entire game by watching my OBS preview, meaning I had some strange input lag. It basically felt like trying to use a mouse with my non-dominant hand. So you'll have to excuse the slow mouse movements, but I'm not one to let that stop me from enjoying a game. So this is character creation. There are 6 different races and 9 different classes, with things like Cleric, Berserker, Priest. I chose the Archmage class and started the game. You're met with a cutscene, which is just being typed onto a piece of paper very, very slowly. This is kind of what it's like waiting for them to file your paperwork at the DMV. Maybe this guy had to type his letter through his OBS preview as well. If so, I understand the struggle. Anyway, you wake up on a boat where Tom here finds you in a pile of hay. You're then introduced to another character, Gaida, who's going to help you meet with the captain of the ship. I'm not gonna lie, the entire intro of this game is mostly just dialogue. You speak with Tom, then Gaida, then John, the ship's cook, who gives you some apples and shows you how to eat them by using the U key, and tells you to get more apples in the storage. On the way to the storage, you get stopped by Gus, who kills you and brings you back to life in order to show you how death works in Aesire Online. That seems a little dramatic, but anyway, I made my way over to the storage. Just kidding, I was interrupted again by Gaida, who showed me how to equip some armor that I had in my inventory. Finally, I was able to make it over to Brutus, who finally lets me down into the storage. Here's where you participate in your first bit of combat against these rats, and it's basically what you would expect. You can press the control key to attack. Also, one annoying thing is that they can body block you from moving in certain places, so you'll have to kill enemies in order to generally get around them, especially if there is a lot of them. Anyway, tons of dialogue later where I spoke again with Brutus, who told me to go talk to Joan, but he really meant John, the cook. I'm assuming that's just a typo. And then John had me talk to Tom, who finally had me go to the upper deck to speak with Bob, who told me that before I could speak with the captain, I first had to speak with Jesse, but on my way to Jesse, I got interrupted by Cassandra. And when I finally made it to Jesse, I got to learn about some sort of ranged combat system where I basically played Guitar Hero with fish outside the boat. And that's where I decided to call it. The game honestly plays okay and isn't too bad, but it's overwhelmingly boring. It's basically dialogue the game. And for that, it gets a D. Moving on. RavenDawn. This game actually came out quite recently, in early 2024. If I remember correctly, the developers actually reached out to me and asked me to try this game. I was busy at the time and didn't get a chance, but here we are 1 year later. Let's see what it's all about. First of all, sound design and music, awesome. Character creation, looking pretty clean so far. It reminds me of Realm of the Mad God a bit. Tons of different archetypes to choose from, and you get to look at all their active and passive abilities. And wow, there's even a video preview which shows you what each of the abilities looks like. So I chose the wizardry archetype, I named myself Waydot, and you're spawned into a nice farmhouse. It's WASD to move, and you press F or right click to interact. I went downstairs and spoke with my mom and...
finally risen from their bed. Happy birthday, dear.
It's actually really nicely voice acted. Apparently, today's my birthday. You're told to go visit the neighbor, Haimo, who has a special order made just for you, and I was given a staff as my first weapon. I'm not gonna lie though, similar to Tibia and a few other games on this list, this sort of diagonal camera angle is a little disorienting at times when trying to move around, though you do get used to it fairly quickly. I spoke again with my dad, who teaches you how to equip your staff and shows you how to attack the scarecrow. Afterwards, you talk to your mom, who tells you to gather some berries from the garden, and you're introduced to a bit of gathering as well. Afterwards, she gives you your birthday cake, and you're shown how to eat it from your inventory. I love this sort of narrative tutorial where you get all of the information that's relevant on actually how to play the game, but it also follows along a cohesive storyline. Next, your dad tells you about some beetles on the farm which you need to get rid of, and this teaches you the tab targeting system, and as long as you're close enough and targeting the enemy, your character will be auto-attacking. Then you're shown the ability tree, which you can use to assign your first ability, Fireball, which seriously impresses your dad, and because of it, he wants to pass on a heirloom, the family compass. You then use this compass to find the dog Bandit, who watches over and guards the village. This actually took me all the way to level 2, and afterwards I took Bandit back home and spoke with my dad. But then, everything takes a turn, and you wake up from your dream. In the same house, but you're an old man, with Bandit the dog waiting just outside your room. The house looks broken and beaten, and the farm looks rather run down. You're given a few items to prepare before you and Bandit make the journey away from your home. You gather some white flowers to leave behind as you say goodbye to your parents one last time. I'm not kidding, I genuinely almost teared up here. I just can't handle the passage of time story arc. It always makes me extremely sad, especially now that I have a 3-year-old son at home. And yes, I cried at the beginning of Up. Anyway, this game is phenomenal. The UI is fantastic, the gameplay is responsive, the skills system seems super cool and in-depth, there's tons of classes to play around with, and the narration and voice acting is the best we've seen today. We're going with an A for RavenDawn. Next, Zezenia Online. Released in 2008, apparently it's a free-to-play 2D MMO with intense PvP and PvE, but just going off these pictures in the store page, you would never be able to tell. It's literally almost exactly a 1-to-1 Tibia clone. Even a lot of the item models look the exact same, like coins. So I did some research, and Tibia and Zezenia are not at all related, with completely separate developers. They have some differences, obviously the UI is slightly different, the graphics might be a little bit cleaner, but everything basically functions the same, even the text in the direct center of your screen, which is the one thing I really disliked about Tibia. The intro is even quite similar as you battle your way through some hurt dragons and make your way through tunnels and dungeons before you make it to the main town. I don't really know what to think in this instance. I'm not well versed enough in Tibia to see the differences in these two games, and honestly, they might as well be the exact same to me personally. So for that reason, it's going right beside Tibia in the D tier. Next up, Warspear Online. a 2D MMO that was originally released as pay-to-play in 2008 before restructuring to a free-to-play model in 2010. So in Warspear, you choose a faction, of which there are 4, but really it's just 2 for each side. One that is more proficient in melee and one that is more proficient in magic for each side. I chose to be Forsaken as it seemed like they had the coolest appearance of classes, and because of that my mage was a warlock. A few more customization options before you're dropped into the 2D version of the Undercity from Classic WoW. Which makes sense considering I chose to be Forsaken, and another name for undead in WoW is the Forsaken. However, because I joined through the Steam client, I was immediately gifted this gentlemanly outfit, of which I had to immediately don. It's classy, okay? You wouldn't understand. Anyway, I spoke with Marmor here and began working on questing. He had me fill this flask and then wanted me to talk to Sokvi. I killed a couple of spiders to get a grasp of combat, and it's basically just click to attack. You have a bunch of abilities in your action bar, and then I spoke with Sokvi, who told me to go back to Marmor, who had me go inside the workshop in order to read this giant book, which I did. And then I went back and spoke to Marmor, and he told me to speak to Sokvi, who told me to talk to Rupert, who I could find in the city square, which I did. And that got me to level 2, which granted me a skill point. Nice. And then Rupert had 2 quests, one to speak with the snowy bound messenger for the Christmas event, but another to speak with the innkeeper. I then decided to click on some of my abilities to see what would happen, and somehow summoned this giant walking snowball companion. I'm assuming this also has to do with the Christmas event, but either way, he was quite intimidating. So then I went into the inn and spoke with the innkeeper, and he wanted me to help by bringing mugs of ale to 3 of the patrons. So I did, but then after he still had more chores for me, so I had to pick up 2 empty bottles and 3 papers, which were laying across the floor. And honestly, I kinda despise games that start off with so much dialogue and collection. I would much prefer to be introduced to the combat system through some sort of scenario. Especially in a game like this, where I clearly have 8 available abilities, I want to start learning and using these. They sound really cool, and I want to start understanding my class immediately. Not doing endless dialogue chains and chores for NPCs. I mean, after cleaning up the inn, the innkeeper had me go outside and clear 3 piles of dung from the stables, and then after I was told to talk to Kaiza, who sent me to talk to the town skinner and the town carpenter. And then after the innkeeper had another quest to talk to the town blacksmith, and then I had to talk to Rupert outside who wanted me to light 3 lanterns in town, and then I finally talked to the skinner and then the carpenter and then the blacksmith, and then I think you get the gist. Like, can I just finally play the game? Anyway, this entire dialogue chain finally culminated in a small little fight against this zombie, and I was finally shown a bit of combat. All in all, I could see this game being pretty great. It seems to have really well done design, a good functionality, a cool skill system, but it was just kind of boring off the start. Way too much dialogue. So, C tier for me. Alright, we've got another one that I'm a little bit nervous about. I don't think this quick of a review is going to be enough time to review this game with the level of thoroughness that it probably deserves. An absolute classic in the MMO genre, one of the most commented games on my channel, released in 1997. This will be my first impressions of Ultima Online. Now, you guys already know, I struggle with the really old games. I'm okay with things like EverQuest 2 and onwards, but these really old games that become tedious, not due to any fault of their own, just the fact that they're outdated, makes it tough for me to be a proper critic in these scenarios. I'm going to try my best and play Ultima for a bit here, and hopefully come to a fair conclusion based on my time spent playing. So to start things off, I struggled for a little while, first of all, to download the correct version, as there's multiple versions of Ultima. On top of that, account creation was a complete nightmare. I would show you, but I have private info on the screen. Essentially, I had a few issues connecting accounts. I had to use multiple emails to retry the whole process, and it was quite the hassle. But eventually I figured it out and we got in. This is a ton of servers available for a game that came out so long ago. I chose Atlantic because it had the highest population and began creating my character. There are 3 separate races, elf, human, and gargoyle. And furthermore, there are 7 different classes, with 6 of them sounding pretty standard, but once again we have blacksmith here, which in most modern games would probably be a trade skill and not a class. Anyway, I chose to be a human mage, obviously, and you can actually further customize your class with a ridiculous amount of options, adjusting their stats and skills even further. I didn't want to mess with anything here, but for the people who love a ton of customizability and options, this might be right up your alley. Anyways, a bit later, I chose a starter location that was recommended for new players, and we finally made it into the game, with 3 pop-ups to start, including an option to use the Enhanced or Classic client's default settings. I stuck with the Enhanced, and then I had a tip of the day, which told me about the Circle of Transparency. And finally, a note from the town crier, where I guess you can see recent updates or changes in the store. But yeah, Here's the user interface. We have a ton of that black space, which just seemed to be standard for these early MMOs, a character sheet to the right of the actual display, as well as an inventory, a nameplate, and a few action bars. It's WASD to move and double-click to interact. I noticed some random items that were just laying on the ground around me, one of them which was a bag, which I was able to open up, and actually, just by clicking and dragging the items, I was able to put them in my inventory. So I put the bag in my bag and opened the bag, and now I had 2 bags. Nice. Anyway, I began exploring around a bit. I found the dock where an NPC had a quest, and they said they had an opportunity to make some gold. But first, I decided to look through my spellbook, and the majority of skills that I could see were obviously unavailable to me, but they also seemed to have nothing to do with combat. A lot of them would help me in chatting with NPCs, or meditation, or item imbuing, but I don't really see anything related to combat. So I talked with this NPC, Lacey the Bride, and she told me that she needed a hammer and nails, and that I should take her to the carpenter. She then began to follow me. I wasn't really sure where the carpenter was, but I took a closer look at the minimap and found a symbol with a hammer. Surely that has to be the carpenter. Well, I tried to enter the building and even went upstairs before I opened a bedroom door, and then after I actually fell off the staircase, which I didn't think was possible before realizing, oh, there's a front door. Anyway, as it turns out, it doesn't matter because this wasn't the carpenter. This was the tinker's house. Okay. So I spent a few more moments looking closer at the minimap, and aha! The carpenter. A saw. That makes more sense. So I got Lacey to the right spot and she gave me some gold, but I don't think I actually got any XP for handing in that quest. I took another quest from this NPC Hargrove, who wanted me to get an axe and chop 60 logs. Anyway, at this point, I didn't feel like doing any more townly chores for people, so I decided to make my way into the wild and figure out how to fight something. I found some wolves and looked through my spellbook and skills to see if I could find anything that represented attack, but I targeted a boar, a panther, an eagle, a dog, a cougar, a goat, and even a rabbit, and still couldn't figure it out. This is what I mean by tedious. I'm sure one of you who has played Ultima for years and years will be in the comments like, dude, you just press Alt F3. It's so obvious. But this is ultimately, no pun intended, why I dislike older games. The sort of uniformity that games now have in terms of controls and basic functions didn't really exist back then. So you always need to read a guidebook to figure out how to basically just exist within the game. I'm sure Ultima has a rich and full world of lore and history and some fun gameplay hidden inside. But as a first impression, it's not for me. D. Next, we have Key to Heaven, an open world 2D MMO that was just released 2 months ago. Character creation is standard, we've seen through the whole video, though interestingly, this game shows you your stat points, of which you have 10 in every attribute. You would think because you're on the character creation page that you might be able to change these stat points around or apply some new points, but no, you just start with 10 in every attribute. Anyway, you're given the opportunity to play as a hardcore character, meaning if you die, your character will be permanently deleted. I thought I had actually turned this option off, but it turns out that this meant it was on. Oops. And I accidentally stumbled on this while designing my character. Double oops. Anyway, as you can see, I was a little shocked that my character was hardcore, but that's okay. I didn't plan on dying anyway. There's a question mark tile on the ground, which reads right-click to read quest. I figured the quest would be on the question mark or the sign and spent altogether way too long trying to right-click both of these things. I eventually realized it was trying to get me to right-click on the NPC here. Oh wait. No, she doesn't have a quest either. I literally spent like 3 minutes here just trying to figure out what this question mark was trying to tell me before just moving on anyway. I killed some rats and made my way east where I found this piece of paper on the ground, which had the subtitle, Quest, but I don't think it actually gave me a quest. Anyway, I made my way downstairs into this dungeon and fought some more rats. You actually get experience in this game every single time you deal damage, instead of just when the enemy dies, which is pretty interesting. I found a chest in the dungeon, which dropped me some new pants. Nice. And also realized I had a skill page with 6 unassigned skill points, even though I was still only level 1. Okay, well, I assigned some of those, which seemed to mostly just be passive benefits. I finally made it through the dungeon and was introduced to a town where I found my first quest. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually accept it until I was level 10. I talked with a few more NPCs, couldn't find any more quests, so I made my way out and saw a giant cave in the distance. I gotta start grinding, so I figured I'd head inside. In there, I found a bow, a sword, some potions, and tons of things on the ground which I could pick up. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually use these items yet, as they had requirements like 25 strength or 20 endurance and 18 strength. So I fought some rats and some ratatas, which I think is a Pokemon. But I also got to level 2, where I was able to assign some further stat points and hopefully get closer to equipping some of these items. I kept exploring and fighting, and actually while attacking this Spideria, I got way more XP per hit than I was getting while fighting the rats, so this took me straight to level 3. However, that's when the game crashed and wouldn't open again no matter how many times I tried. So it was shaping up to be somewhat decent, rather lacking in direction, but at least I was progressing and leveling up and getting some new items. However, the fact that it became unplayable halfway through my time playing means, unfortunately, gonna have to go with an F on this one. Sorry, Key to Heaven, you were so close. Moving on, we have Stein World. This is a big and persistent fantasy world with lots of variety, quest items, dungeons, professions, etc., released in 2019. Let's check it out. So, character customization and account registration are on the same page, but you can sort of customize this little guy before logging into the game. Your character wakes up in a room completely naked, and no, I'm not kidding, he's hungover from the night before, and you need to gather your clothes and find your favorite Stein, which you lost. Hence the name Stein World. I finished the quest Talk to the Cleaning Lady, which rewarded me with my pants and shoes, but I was still unfortunately shirtless. Luckily, my shirt was just over here on the floor, and by bringing my shirt to the cleaning lady, I finished the quest called Find a Shirt. What is happening right now? Anyway, I was told to head downstairs to talk to the innkeeper about where my Stein might be located. Basically, that's how this game is working so far. Every NPC you talk to gives you a quest to talk to another NPC, and slowly we're gathering our surroundings and becoming less hungover. It's altogether way too relatable, and I'm surprised the developers were able to put together such a decent looking game, considering they were probably wasted while coding it. Actually, the user interface and attention to detail within the 8-bit graphics is phenomenal. This game looks fantastic. I took a look at the world map and it seems decently sized, and I did find an in-game shop, and one of the first featured items would cost 40 euros. Which is actually quite a telling point. First of all, this game is probably produced in Europe, which explains the drinking theme, and also they're probably really in need of money because the devs spent their entire paycheck on alcohol. So honestly, you should spend this 40 euros. Okay, anyway, I talked to the cook who wanted me to go to the basement to kill some rats. This seems to be quite the common theme in these games. I've killed so many rats in this video, it's getting a bit ridiculous. But combat is standard click to attack. You will not keep auto-attacking, so you have to keep clicking, but the rats were easy enough, and I also found some wine and firewood for 2 other quests that the chef wanted me to do. And handing in all of those quests finally got me to level 2. I helped out with the customers in the bar section of the inn for a while, and eventually made it outside to go find the blacksmith. And honestly, in terms of 8-bit graphics, I think we might have a winner here with Stein World. The game is really well designed in a cute but also detail-oriented way. Honestly, this game kind of feels like the medieval combat MMO version of Stardew Valley, and I'm here for it. That's going to be a B, for beer, but also for Stein World. Next. Mirage Online Classic. I honestly thought this was going to be another super old game, which came out in the early 2000s, but believe it or not, it's only 5 years old. And that's because while you can download this game on Steam, it also operates fully within a web browser, which is pretty cool. There aren't too many browser-based games in 2024. Let's check it out. When you first log in, you hear this.
Welcome to Mirage Online Classic.
Which is amazing, and then you can choose your class. For some reason, the drop-down menu didn't appear in my recording, but there's a few different options from Warlock to Vampire. No Mage, unfortunately, so I went with Warlock again. Once into the game, you spawn into Newville Island, and this is your user interface. They definitely wanted to appeal to that old-school style of interface while maintaining what seems to be a little less tedious functionality. You have an inventory on the right side, including armor and weapon slots, a chat box, a nameplate, and lots of menu options on the left side. I walked over to some of these chests where you get a few starter weapons, including a staff, which I double-clicked and dropped on the ground. That double-click will always get me. But eventually I picked it back up and equipped it. You can attack monsters by pressing space, and you can also hold shift to run, which is fantastic, and is something I wish a lot more of these 2D games would implement, as movement always feels a little slow. My staff shot a projectile, and I was basically one-shotting all of these bears. Anyway, I continued forward, and I found a learning hatchet, which I equipped, and I was able to chop down trees with. You basically just stand in front of a tree and press space while having the axe equipped, and you have a chance to get some timber. Once you've exhausted the tree's resources, you'll stop getting timber, though the tree doesn't actually disappear. So I have no idea how you would tell when it respawns or has more. Anyways, after that, I picked up this key and made my way forward. Here, you're given a short introduction to how shops work, and you have to buy another key from the shop in order to unlock the door and progress further. That's basically the end of the tutorial. You make your way forward and spawn into the main game where you're given a fishing rod, a pickaxe, and a better hatchet for gathering. I immediately found a dungeon filled with, you guessed it, more rats. It It was a bit of a maze to explore, but I eventually made my way to the end of the dungeon and faced off against this wall beast, which presented no real challenge. But afterwards, I was given a chest full of loot. All in all, Mirage Online feels like it knows what it's trying to do. It's a callback to the older MMOs within the genre, while still being super accessible and being available in your browser. The game sort of feels like a much older and less refined Realm of the Mad God, without the permadeath mechanics. I'll give Mirage Online a C. Not bad. Next up, we have Kaetram. Kaetram? An early access 2D MMO that was actually just released in May of 2024. Right on account creation, you're asked if you want to play as a normal character, an Iron Man, or a hardcore Iron Man. So pretty obviously RuneScape inspired. Okay. So far, the UI is looking awesome, and we actually have some unique options when it comes to character customization. I even managed to make it look like my character was wearing a suit. I definitely thought this was a medieval fantasy game, so I'm surprised to see I can wear modern clothes. And also, the first NPC you chat with is a programmer with a laptop. Okay, I get it, we're breaking the fourth wall again. Gotcha. Now, at this point, you might have realized that my character has yellow text outlined with a black border, and is already somehow level 3. Or you may have noticed that I have a health bar, a mana bar, but also a prayer bar which starts at 10. Oh yeah, here's the prayer menu. It seems like we have prayers for attack, strength, defense, and even magic. This seems similar to some sort of other game I've actually played before. I strolled outside and tried to pick some berries, but I was told I need a foraging level of at least 5. I went to attack this rat and missed quite a few times, but eventually took him out. I talked to Jeff over here, and it turns out he needs help repairing his sled. He lets me know that he needs 250 noted logs. Okay, come on now, that's a little on the nose. Has any other game in history ever used RuneScape's noting system? I don't think I've ever seen that done before outside of RuneScape. I believe I may have stumbled upon a true 8-bit version of RuneScape. Seriously, there is so much from RuneScape in this game, it's insane. I found a collection log which details all the loot you can get from the monsters you've killed. I equipped a bronze axe and began to chop down trees. Sure enough, I got logs in my inventory, of which you have 28 slots. I even found a quest list which features all available quests showing up in red if you haven't started them, yellow if it's in progress, and bright green if it's finished. And here is the skills page. This is crazy. I found 8-bit RuneScape. It's actually, genuinely, kind of well done. If you, like me, have spent many nights over the course of your younger years Googling for games like RuneScape, but nothing ever came up that could scratch that RuneScape itch, well, here you have it. Kaetram Online, it's a little on the nose, but it's basically 8-bit RuneScape. I mean, it's a mix of RuneScape 3 and old school, because at one point I clicked on the map and there was a teleport button, and I was able to fast travel to that town. In that town, I even went to the bank and noted my logs. Honestly, even though they obviously copied RuneScape, the style of game and the user interface and the WASD movement is different enough that I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I wouldn't mind playing this a bit more, to be honest. Kaetram, I think you get a B, because even though it's a copy of a lot of RuneScape's mechanics and ideas, it seems really well done. I can applaud a good copy of something I already enjoy. Next up, we have another old game. I think the last truly classical game on this list. But Wyvern was a 2D graphical multi-user dungeon, or MMO, that was released in 2001. Unfortunately, the game was shut down in 2013, but the developer Steve was able to reboot the game in 2016. And it was even released on iOS, so you can play this game on your phone as well. Anyway, character creation involves choosing your race, which is also your class, and also your appearance. You can be a human, an elf, an ice giant, storm giant, a vampire, but I went with this human male because it's basically the closest thing I could get to playing a mage. And yes, this is Wyvern. This is an absolutely insane, unhinged user interface. There are 24 menu options in the top, and I have no clue what most of those icons are even suggesting. On top of that, the game also features further options like game, edit, view, commands. Why? You move by clicking where you want to go. Your character then teleports or slides without any sort of animation, so you're basically just a chess piece. Now, similar to other games we've played in this video, you interact with NPCs by typing to them. However, in some of those other games, you could just say hi. In Wyvern, you need to literally type the word say, and then whatever you want to actually say. So I typed say hello. It's like Simon Says, but there's no Simon. That's it. That's the joke. Anyway, Santa here is going to introduce me to the world and tells me to follow her outside of the hut. We cross a bridge and make it into a town where apparently some kobolds are attacking us. It's hard to tell what's actually happening on screen, but if you read the text here, you can see I'm absolutely slaughtering these kobolds. We kill all of them, and then you're taught how to loot by standing on top of their corpses and double-clicking. As you can see, my inventory on the side here is quickly filling up with their items. They all basically drop the same thing. Afterwards, Santa says we should sell our loot and then tells me to enter the shop, which looks like this. I was pretty confused on how I was supposed to interact with this place. I even found an ATM, the Bank of Wyvern ATM. Now, ATM stands for Automated Teller Machine, so my immersion was hurting, but eventually I did find out how to sell my items. Next up, Santa wanted to teach me how to use spells. She gave me a wand of Fireball, which has 5 Fireball spells inside. And we went to this archery range, which is infested with, you guessed it, more rats. Now, my spell is an AoE, but I didn't expect what would happen next. It's a literal god tier AoE spell. It hits every single tile that's visible on my screen. I killed every rat in one go. That was insane. Anyways, I continued playing on for a short while. I visited a healer which restored my health and went to the banks to store some items before entering a dungeon and once again using my massive AoE, took out half the place in one shot. Overall, once again, this game is way too old for me to legitimately judge, though, to be honest, I actually found it a little bit less tedious than some of the other classical games I played today. Still though, it belongs in the D tier, and that's where it's going. Next up, Born Again, another 2D MMO recently released in 2023. Now, this game is actually permadeath and is attempting to be a bit of an Asian twist on Realm of the Mad God. During character creation, you're only able to choose one class, the Warrior. Apparently, Born Again features 8 classes, but similar to Realm, they need to be unlocked. As you can see, I can unlock another character slot here, either for real money or after earning some in-game currency. Anyway, I clicked play and you're dropped into what is relatively the same tutorial from Realm as well. You're shown movement, combat, dodging obstacles, as well as some of your abilities, including throwing a bomb or this jump attack forward. In fact, the tutorial follows the exact same formula as Realm of the Mad God, even culminating in a boss fight at the end. The user interface is slightly different and it has its own unique style, I'll give them that, but the rest of the game really just looks very similar to Realm. After the tutorial, you finally make it to the player hub, which offers the same sort of amenities you would also find in Realm. Things like a vault to store items, shops, and instances to go into. Which I made my way over there and they look relatively the same as well, even featuring the same sort of indicators of where enemies are located on the map. Listen, if you're sick of Realm of the Mad God, but you don't want the exact same experience with quite a bit less players and seemingly less options for classes and overall less content, I guess Born Again might be the game for you. It otherwise functions and plays really well. It looks good, albeit the same as Realm. So while Realm of the Mad God got an A, this game is clearly a copy. So we're gonna go with C for copy. Next up is PlanetSprite, an online MMO where you interact and trade with fellow players. Currently in early access since its release in 2023, with only 41 reviews, I doubt there's going to be too many fellow players to interact and trade with. But let's check it out. Using the limited character customization options, I was surprised that I was actually able to create a one-to-one copy of Brandon Urie, the lead singer of the popular emo pop band Panic at the Disco. Now, into PlanetSprite, you're spawned on an island with this lovely looking user interface and a quest in the top right corner telling you to gather some twigs and leaves and flint. I did so, and I was told to open the crafting menu in order to make a flint axe and pickaxe, which I could then place on my tool belt, which would of course allow me to mine rocks and chop trees. We've seen so many similar games to this today, including this sort of crafting system, so it's nothing new, but I have to admit it feels really good in PlanetSprite. I love the art style, and the ease of access within the user interface makes gathering and crafting feel like a cohesive and smooth process. I can't imagine how addicted I might have become to a game like this if I had something similar on my Game Boy way back in the day. Afterwards, I was able to create a crafting table which would unlock more recipes, and furthermore was asked to create a hut before venturing into town. You see, this island is your own personal instance, but you can take the boat into town where you would presumably be able to interact with other players, do quests for NPCs, buy or sell resources, and as you can see, it's snowy, which doesn't make sense for a tropical island, but it seems like they're pushing updates for the holidays, at least. I explored around and talked to a few of the NPCs and basically came to the conclusion that this is attempting to be a more sandbox MMO version of Stardew Valley, with slightly less characters. But that's the vibe I got. Overall, the game looks and plays fantastically, and I'm kind of disappointed that there are not more players, because I think trading with others is an important part of being able to build your dream island. But seriously, I wish more people were on. I would definitely try PlanetSprite again in the future. Overall, gonna go with a B, though it could probably be an A if the game continued to show some depth with building and crafting, as well as had an active player base. Moving on to Darkstory. Released in 2020, it's an authentic 2D MMO inspired by the classic old-school RPGs. Wow, way to really set yourself apart, Darkstory. I wonder how many times I've read that sentence in this video. Anyway, this is character creation. You can choose from 4 different classes, including Knight, Mage, Stalker, and Hunter, of which the latter 2 are furries. I don't really understand the point of customizing your character too much here with this 2D image because this is what your character will actually look like in the game. But either way, I chose to be a mage and you're spawned into a small room, it's WASD to move, and you have a sort of Diablo-esque style health and mana bar with plenty of slots available for abilities. You have a massive inventory and a nice interface for spells showing at what level you'll unlock further spells, and I placed a fireball spell into my number 1 slot before speaking with the NPC Dream Seldom, who gave me some clothes before I stepped out into every Pokemon game starter town. I personally always had an affinity for Little Root Town from Gen 3. Unfortunately though, after walking into one of the houses and talking to Khaled, my game crashed. But I loaded Darkstory back up and logged back in, and this time I was able to actually speak with Khaled, who had a quest for me to go outside and fight some kanji, which are just rabbits. Apparently kanji rabbit is a popular Korean doll, so that must be what these are based off. The combat and overall game actually plays really well, and I would have loved to continue on, but unfortunately when I went back to Khaled to turn in the quest, the game once again crashed. So crash on me once, shame on me. Crash on me twice, you get a D. Next up, we have another very popular 2D MMO, IdleOn. Obviously, it's more of an idle type of game being mixed with the MMO world. Originally released in 2020 with almost 20,000 reviews, I'm excited for this one. You begin the game as one epic gamer in an extremely high-level zone. You have 20,000 HP and you begin one-shotting the enemies around you as you deal hundreds of damage. You move over to the next area where the enemies are too difficult and your character realizes he needs a better weapon. There is conveniently an anvil right here, which the game shows you how to climb to access as well as use. You need 4 alien logs and 1 starlight ore in order to craft the Flesh Reaper. So now IdleOn also shows you gathering. After crafting the axe, you start dealing tens of thousands of damage to these ghosts who are no match for you, before meeting the final boss of the dungeon, who basically says you're way too weak to be able to defeat him and he calls you a giant loser. Your character wants to fight him before he realizes that he's actually just in a cutscene. And the only way out is to jump down a hole where you fall all the way down to lowly level 1. You lose your cool axe and all your HP, and that's how you start the game. This was actually the best tutorial of the day, in my opinion. Super self-aware, doesn't take itself too seriously, genuinely comical, and on top of that, it teaches you all the main functions of the game in a short but concise manner. What more could you ask for? Anyway, now is when you actually create your character. You choose a star sign, which sort of acts like a class and determines your starting stats. But you also can choose one accessory, which is your character's appearance, as he's mostly just a blank silhouette. I chose the traffic cone. Once in the game, you're loaded into a decently populated area, and you can interact with the entire user interface. Scriptus here will give you your first quest, which is to defeat these green spores. I took out 5 of them and even got myself to level 2. And after handing in the quest, I was level 3. Next, you're ordered to make your first weapon, which will be boxing gloves. You buy some tape from the nearby shop, which also sells glizzies. And afterwards, I equipped the boxing gloves, upgraded some of my stats, and was told to fight some green frogs. Now, as you can see, there is a giant autoplay button here. And at any time while doing any activity in an area, you can set this to autoplay. Meaning I would stay here and punch stuff and level up even while I was away from the game. Now, as mentioned earlier in the video, normally I dislike autoplay mechanics in MMOs, but that's because they're often placed awkwardly in games that are not meant to be auto-played, but are meant to be full open worlds which are supposed to be explored and quested through and enjoyed. Whereas IdleOn was created with the intention of being an idle game. And I've had a lot of fun with idle games personally. I'm playing Realm Grinder right now on the side and having a great time. When the idle part of the game is literally part of the game's identity, you can make this work quite well. Anyway, I killed all the green frogs for my quest, made my way back, and was told to learn mining and smithing to get a real introduction to the crafting system. And this can also be set to idle. Furthermore, if you wanted faster rewards, you can also play a small game or do the activity in a non-idle way, which will grant you benefits from not just idling. But either way, whenever you want to work on combat or some form of gathering or some form of crafting, basically everything in the game can be done idle. It's truly probably the best idle MMO I've tried thus far, and I applaud them for successfully combining these two genres. That's going to be a B for me. This is a really fun game. I could definitely see myself putting some time into it. However, the UI and the overall graphical feel of the game does bring it down slightly for me personally. But a B is still a very solid score. Next up, we have Phobos, a 2D expansive online multiplayer world, also released in 2020. This is a more modern take on Tibia and Zezenia, its clone, with a modernized sort of cleaned up interface, but with the general same idea, in terms of user interface and graphics. One thing I noticed is this game is very yellow. I'm not sure why they chose this particular shade of brownish yellow to be the lighting of the game, but it definitely gives it an Old school vibe. Anyway, an NPC tells you to travel into the town of Tamari. As you can see from the minimap in the top right, the game doesn't really give you much to go off of, as there seems to be a sort of fog of war mechanic hiding everything until you visit it. Outside of this first building, there's 2 giant books on the ground which explain how classes work in Phobos. There are basically 3 tiers of class available. You start as a citizen, you can be upgraded to a page or apprentice, and finally in tier 3 you can really choose your class and become a knight, a marksman, a rogue, a wizard, etc. It sounds like this is quite the long process, and it may actually take a while to start forging your character's identity. There's even 11 more pages within this guide telling you specifically how to start your journey of becoming each of those different classes, because they all have a different method of learning and things that need to be accomplished before you can become that class. Which all seems a bit complicated personally, especially for a 2D game. These tend to thrive off of initial simplicity, which become more and more complex as you play the game further. However, it is unique, and I've never seen this level of class requirement in other MMOs. By the time you're ready to play your class, this is a decision you've certainly thought quite a lot about. However, unfortunately, that's where Phobos becomes a little tedious. That damn word, tedious, again. I was told to speak with the innkeeper in town and listen to one of his stories, as well as grab a beer. Finding the inn took a few moments, but once again the game operates on a sort of typing to NPC system. This resulted in some back and forth with the innkeeper, where if you accidentally step away by just 1 step, you have to reset the conversation. I made this mistake about 3 separate times before I finally heard a story from him. And even though he gave me a beer while we were chatting, when I made my way back to the original NPC who sent me to do this, apparently I was supposed to bring him a beer from the innkeeper. And I'm not gonna lie, I just shut the game off at that point, because if it takes 10 minutes just to figure out how to complete the very first objective due to a bunch of arbitrary mechanical tediousness, I'm just not really gonna enjoy the game in the long run. I can't imagine how difficult it would actually be to choose a class. So for that reason, Phobos, you get a big fat D. And we're on to our final game at this point, Kaion Tale, another 2D MMO that was literally also released in 2020. What happened in 2020? Why did so many 2D MMOs get released? Anyway, character creation features 2 separate factions, and there are 6 classes available, with 2 locked for each faction, including the one I would have liked to play, Sorcerer. But that's okay, I chose the Necromancer anyway. Here you can actually see 3 different types of specializations that your character could go into. For example, I could choose Soul Reaper, Pestilence, or Death Mentor, each featuring a slightly different playstyle and a different type of main damage. You're spawned into a sort of desert area, and the user interface looks decent, but it is a little cluttered. There's this giant menu which shows you other nearby online players, of which there were a few, and it shows you what level they are. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this menu is, but maybe it could be useful in PvP scenarios. Now, interestingly, in order to interact with anything, you had to hold the Q key. But by holding the Q key, this would also set your auto attack to auto. So after speaking with any NPC or holding Q to pick an item off the ground, you would then have to turn your auto attack off. It's an interesting design. Anyway, according to my quest page, there are separate acts within the game, but I had to finish all of the achievements in the tutorial. These can be done at any time and basically just walk you through the various parts of the game. For example, one of the quests was just to equip a piece of armor, and another quest wanted me to fight these quilters, which are located around the starting area. And after fighting the first one, was that the World of Warcraft level up sound? Let's get a replay on that. I think that's the World of Warcraft level up sound. If not, it's very, very close. Anyway, I continued on completing the tutorial objectives like fighting quilters, picking up gold, equipping items, and buying items from the shop. All in all, the game plays pretty well, and it's nice to see some new player activity in the starting area. There also seems to be a day and night cycle, which is definitely pretty unique in a 2D game. I strolled into the next area and was promptly defeated by a swarm of enemies, and death seemingly had no real consequences. I just spawned back in the starting area. Towards my end of the playthrough, I noticed a lot of people were speaking in chat, and I asked if anyone else spoke English. I never got a reply. The game plays decent, and it seems like there's a straight path of progression forward, though it mostly just seems to be focused on combat and grinding, with no real narrative direction. So, final rating, I'll go with a C for Kaion Tale. And there we have it, folks. That is every 2D MMO I could get my hands on within the past few weeks. Here is what the full ratings look like. After having played all of these games, I think it's a pretty solid list. As mentioned before, I didn't play these games for a super long time. This was meant to be a very first impression of these games. Most gamers decide quite early on in a game if they want to keep playing, so it's vitally important that these games provide a good first experience within that first hour of gameplay. Of course, some of the games I rated poorly might actually be fantastic later on, but the first impression is just not very strong. If you guys would like me to go back and further delve into some of these games, let me know which ones you would like to see the most, or which ones my rating completely missed the mark. But now, we need to decide which one had the best first impression and overall gameplay, and which one had the very worst. This is not going to be easy. Let's start off with the worst. Now, as mentioned before, there were 11 or 12 games that I literally just couldn't access, so those might technically be objectively worse than the 5 games we have in the F category. 2 of these are just poorly done MapleStory clones, so they can't really be the absolute worst, right? In my opinion, one game stood out a little bit more than anything else as one of the worst gameplay experiences I've ever had. Drumroll please. Swords and crystals. First of all, why can't I see anything? Please, just turn up some of the settings, get rid of the fog, and make this game more accessible. Secondly, the janky function of the scroll wheel, which you need to use to interact with every menu in the game, is ridiculous. You literally have to scroll to a close scroll wheel option to close said scroll wheel. Third, I had no idea what the general direction of this game was meant to be. I didn't understand the point of it, why the tutorial was taking such a long time, and what did I even have to look forward to once the tutorial was finished. On top of that, I just had a general feeling of annoyance during my time with Swords and Crystals, and for that reason, I will be rating it the worst 2D MMORPG. Now, it's time to crown a winner, a king, the diamond in the rough. After everything was said and done, 3 games in particular stood out and managed to claim a very prestigious A-tier rating. These games include RavenDawn. The narrative genius of this game had me literally almost in tears while being presented in a beautifully done UI and world. Next, Realm of the Mad God, the perfect mixing of a permadeath roguelike and an MMO with a very classical 8-bit artistic style, but smooth and modern gameplay. And finally, HeartWood. Really a culmination of just doing everything right, from combat to questing to crafting to having lots of players around. It overall felt the most similar to many of the 3D MMOs which I play on this channel. I genuinely felt like a newcomer starting in a brand new world and was excited to continue forward. So, how do I decide? I want to make it pretty clear that any of these 3 games could easily take the #1 spot. But the one that stood out the most to me, the one I will most definitely be revisiting, in fact I've already been playing it more since I continued making this video, is Realm of the Mad God. What a completely awesome idea and an even better execution. Permadeath in a way that makes you want to get back up and start again almost immediately. The further content being locked behind achievements and further progress, the differing playstyles of so many different classes, the constant risk of hardcore in a game where the smallest mistake could spell disaster, all mixed together in an MMO format, it just takes the cake for me personally. I literally can't wait to play more. And the same goes for our runner-ups, RavenDawn and HeartWood. Anyway, folks, that was a long video. If you made it all the way to the end from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. If you enjoy these types of videos where I do a delve into a massive almost genre or subgenre, let me know. I had so much fun making this one, and I learned a lot about a part of the MMO genre that previously I had never really stepped foot in. Now, as always, if you guys enjoyed, a like, a comment, a sub, those things help a bunch. And if you really enjoyed, consider becoming a channel member. But I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.